Hello and welcome back to Simon's Rants and to another explained video. Today we're going to be explaining together. So if you've seen the trailer for this movie, you already know the basic idea. Dave Franco and Alison Brie, a real-life couple, get to play a couple here who seemingly are becoming either stuck together or maybe even having their bodies fused together. You see them being stuck side by side and having to pull apart, but you also see maybe they're actually fitting inside of each other, as you see in the shot where they have to try to cut each other apart. I think everybody who watches these kind of movies immediately knew this was an allegorical horror movie. This is a movie that is representing something deeper while showing it in a simplified and maybe horrific way, but I think also a lot of people assumed something that was wrong. A lot of people, myself included, assumed that this movie was about toxic relationships, codependent relationships, where you have to be with that person or you go insane or whatever. You're just dependent on that person. You can't live without them. And yes, there are aspects of this movie that are like that, but overall, that's not the point of this movie, nor the point of the allegory. It goes much further and deeper than that. You do see when this first happens that Dave Franco is drawn to her much more than she is to him, and so it looks like a toxic, dependent, one-sided, one-directional relationship, but that's only a fraction of what this movie actually is about, so I wanted to get into the rest of it for those of you who have seen it and didn't get it, or for those of you who watch these kind of videos before they watch movies for some reason. For those of you who haven't watched the movie yet, to summarize the basic plot, you see this movie starts out with this cave in the ground, a pit if you will, that has a pond in it, and these two dogs drink from the pond and then begin fusing together like we see later happen to the main characters. The main characters, of course, then eventually fall into the same pit and drink from the same pond, which is just insane if you do that. Like, you're just trying to die drinking still water. Oh my goodness. And then, of course, yes, the plot ends up going from there, where they begin slowly sticking together. First thing is their legs stick together. Not a lot, enough that they can still painfully pull apart, but then it gets to the point where they have to cut each other apart, and eventually, as you see in the movie, if you've seen it, they eventually stop trying and give in. So what is this movie about if it's not about toxic relationships and being too reliant or too dependent on people? Well, as we see, there is a lot of marriage symbolism in this movie. It's also overtly said by the end of the movie. But starting out, this cave I mentioned, the way to it is lined by bells, wedding bells. It's representing immediately the wedding trail, if you will, the bridal path to this wedding ceremony. Because they fall into this pit, they take a plunge, a euphemism for getting married, or any other major event in your life really, but in this case marriage, and they fall into this pit that has pews in it. It ends up turning out that it was a chapel that sank into the earth, but even if it wasn't, there were pews there. This was a chapel of sorts in the ground regardless of what was going on. So we see wedding bells, we have a bridal path, and we have pews, a chapel. So all of this, along with the plunge, the falling in, the diving in to this situation, all is euphemisms, all is an allegory for marriage. So this movie isn't about any old relationship, it is about specifically marriage, and that's where the things shift, because in a marriage, you should be one. You shouldn't be individuals, you should be working in tandem together. But that's something, especially in people nowadays, is a little bit scarier than it used to be, even a little bit taboo, where like individuality matters so much, and people try to maintain their individuality rather than becoming part of a unified, singular couple, married couple. There's a lot of religious aspects to this movie. We have this character who appears to be the bad guy, but if you view the ending like I do, it ends up not being the case, where he is cheering them on to this thing. It's a religious, terrifying thing. It's cult-like, and that's how people who are scared of marriage, scared of commitment, view that kind of talk. If somebody came to you and said you need to become one flesh, and you never heard that term before, it would sound terrifying. There's a lot of stuff in traditional religious circles that are said, that have been said so long that people forget how weird it sounds. And something like saying two fleshes becoming one is taken literally in this movie and taken to a horrific extent, because if you are a big fighter for maintaining your individuality, something like giving that up to become part of a unified couple can sound terrifying. And we see throughout this movie examples of what happens when you aren't open, when you aren't willing to partake in this process. The cult leader, if you will, the guy who I said seems like a bad guy but ends up being a good guy, is trying to help them with this, even if it's painful. He cuts her open. He takes a knife and cuts a slit in her wrist, her forearm, saying you need to be open and willing. Which, once again, if you are terrified of commitment, if you're terrified of letting this happen, losing yourself into the greater relationship, then yeah, that sounds terrifying and painful. But the metaphor there is you need to be open. Literally, he opens her up, and you need to be willing for the process to happen. You need to be willing for the unification process to happen, where you kind of lose yourself to become a part of a greater thing. But we see throughout the movie them, as well as others, resisting that process. They're literally grabbing onto things to prevent themselves from flying toward each other. They are trying to stop this process from happening, and it's extremely painful because they fail at it, and they do get stuck together at various times, and that really hurts. We see them have to cut each other apart. That's painful. We see them have sex in a scene and then have to rip themselves apart. Because when you try to be half committed, when you try to be partially connected to somebody but not all the way in, it is going to cause so much pain in the long run. That's something they keep bringing up. If we're going to separate, it's just going to keep getting more painful, so we should do it sooner rather than later. It's only going to get worse. Once again, that's how people view relationships. They're trying to find a way out because they don't want to get hurt, but that's not how relationships are supposed to work. You're supposed to be all in. You're supposed to be fully committed, because that's the only way you can actually reach the full potential of what a relationship is supposed to be. Two people working in perfect tandem and in perfect harmony. We see another couple at the beginning of the movie has gone missing, and we don't see them again until near the end of the movie. They have had this fusion process begin, but are not open and willing. Maybe they were open, but they weren't entirely willing, because we see that no matter how long it's been with them, they definitely started this process before the main character of Allison and Dave, but they are still not fully fused, and they are in pain, they're in agony, they're crying for help, because they are in an imperfect, unbalanced, not unified marriage. And that only causes pain because you're not on the same page, you're not working together, you're actively fighting against each other, even though you are connected. It doesn't work like that. You can't live like that. So this movie ends with them actually embracing the process and actually becoming one individual, which is still a painful thing. You see, as they are becoming formed together, you have to move. He moves his arm through her back, and her shoulder blade shifts out of place. They are becoming disformed and disfigured in a way which cannot be a happy experience. It has to be a little bit painful, but it's for a greater good, because once you get through that initial pain of willingness to transform yourself and die to yourself for this relationship, then it leads to something better. Now, once again, I know this is a little bit of a touchy subject, because nowadays people like to say you should maintain your individuality, you shouldn't become obsessed with your partner, all of that, and there's truth in that. But if you're married to somebody, you kind of have to be obsessed with them for it to work. You kind of have to be willing, I mean, not kind of, you literally, you have to be willing to change yourself, because people are changing. People are adapting constantly. If you want to be with somebody, you have to be willing to change yourself to make it continue to work. There's sacrifices that have to be made every day in a healthy relationship, and that's not a bad thing. People treat it like it is. It's not. There's also commentary in this movie about being in a stagnant relationship, which is a fear a lot of people have. And so Dave Franco is terrified of commitment to this relationship, because he saw in this movie literally his dad die and his mom stick by him. But being dead and then staying with it is used as an analogy for having a dead or malformed relationship. The scent of death that he uses to describe walking into the room when his dad is there, dead, and his mom is just sitting in bed with him, still smiling, because her brain broke. She couldn't comprehend him being dead, so just kept going to bed with him every night as he rotted away. That memory was triggered by a scent of smelling something else dead, having this dead rat's nest in his house, in his room, as a child and not noticing it, because he said the scent grew gradually. It wasn't just not there and then all of a sudden there the next day. It was something that got worse and worse over time. So when his dad came into the room, he could smell it, but he couldn't. And that's how it is in relationships, is you're not in love and then all of a sudden one day you're not anymore. It's a gradual shift. It happens over time, and complacency can set in, and you're just like, well, I'm already committed, so I guess I'll stay here. I've got nothing better to do. And one half of that relationship may still be in love and may be in denial about it, may be unable to accept that their partner doesn't actually love them anymore. And since they're not leaving, says, okay, I'm not either. Why would I? It's not directly connected to the two becoming one analogy, but why it's important for this story is it shows why Dave Franco's character was afraid of commitment and was distracting him and keeping him away from intimacy. It wasn't about the death, literally. It was about the death of a relationship. The fear of commitment, because what if that happens? But once again, like I said, the ending of this movie just goes to show that actually marriage is a good thing. This is a good thing. You should let it happen. You should let yourself be obsessed with your partner and work together, become one, be unified, be partners. The religious cult-like guy that we have, at first, it seems like maybe he's trying to get in bed with her and that's why he's so friendly, but it turns out, one, he's gay. Two, he's already married, he's already unified with somebody, and he just wants that for her because it would be a great thing. He's like, look how great my marriage is. Look how great it was to get unified. Don't you want that too? Of course, this movie is a horror movie, and it's about having fear of that commitment, so they have to portray that in a scary way. But when you see the ending and see how the unification is the only way for them to actually thrive and live together, I think that's a really fascinating way, is like people terrified of commitment, people terrified of marriage, and then the bad guy in this movie, making things even more terrifying, is actually a good guy who is advocating for marriage and how great it can be, saying, look, it's worked for me, look, it's awesome, I love it. And frankly, that is off-putting to people when they see somebody that in lockstep. When you see a couple and you're expecting to see individuals, maybe that is frightening to you. Like when you see at the very end, her parents, Alison Brie's parents, come to visit, and they show up at the door, they ring that marriage bell that's on all of these doors now, and they see who? This unified couple. They don't see two people, they see one individual. And that can be scary as a parent, or somebody in a relationship, or not, who's not used to seeing people that unified, that harmonized. And it may be like, whoa, what happened to you? You changed. Good. You're supposed to. You're supposed to let go of parts of you. You're supposed to accept parts of the other people. That's part of harmony. That's part of working together. And you know what else that imagery reminds me of? What else is something that is two people bonded together? Two people's likenesses mixed together. They're kids. And so that's a fun little sprinkle in there as well. We see also right after the unification process, we've got this nice little pan over all the bloodshed that had gone on before, because we hurt each other trying to maintain ourselves. Once we're willing to let go of that, once we're willing to be open and accepting of the other person and all their little quirks and flaws and everything, and work together, become one, that's when the pain is able to be lessened. Oh, it's brilliant. I love it. This is the most uplifting horror movie I've ever watched in my life. I was not expecting such a happy ending in a horror movie. It was great. I loved it. So anyway, that's how I took all of the things in this movie. Granted, there are other things I could probably, other rabbit holes I could go down, get into, but that's the basics, and I really thought that that was something that a lot of people wouldn't necessarily get on a first watch. So I wanted to talk about it. I also just wanted to talk about it because I really enjoyed it. But what do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below, and of course, don't forget to like, share, and if you're new here, subscribe. Thanks, guys. Bye.